The following podcast contains subject matter that may be unsuitable for more sensible viewers. Views expressed here do not reflect that of any community that you would want to be a part of. Listener discretion is mandatory. Mama, what does trans mean?
No! And welcome back. Yes, hi, hello. Welcome back to Tranifesto. Just the show where we look at queer media and representation and, stop worrying and... fuck, I screwed this up. Holy shit, give me a second. I need to drink some water.
Hello, and welcome back to Tranifesto, the show where we learn to stop worrying and learn to love bad representation.
Thank you.
Today, I am your host, Amelia Blair, and I am joined by...
I'm Madeline, and apparently I can't do intros anymore because I'm completely lost, so fuck it.
I have taken the throne.
Yes,
this is
Amelia.
A coup.
Amelia is our new host. And
congratulations.
Yeah, and
because
then the
I'm
other...
soft.
Yeah, it's true. Ethot. And then the other person on the call, hello?
Ricarder, the co-hostess with the co-mostest.
Oh, boo!
That's fantastic.
That's terrible. No.
I'm funny.
Well, maybe, arguably. So, hey, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And surprisingly, we're still going, given our current situation. So, just a bit of an overview, folks. All three of us are now living in separate locations, and a couple of us are going to be moving across country. I assume all of us will at some point, just because it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that I will come to Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal
It's just
is
a matter of when.
Yeah, it's the great transmigration. We all have to go there. It's kind of like a weird mecca for us.
For those of you who aren't... For our 2 or 3 fans who aren't Vancouver locals, the process is this. You move from whatever buttfuck town you live in either the interior of BC or the prairies into Vancouver to live your best queer lifestyle. Realize that you will never be able to afford to thrive here. Move to Montreal and then die in Halifax. This is the process. And we cannot deny the process.
No, exactly. It's basically
the pipeline.
Yeah, when you sign up for HRT, this is actually one of the things they tell you, and it's like, now you will be abandoned by families and friends. You'll also move to Montreal. We don't understand it yet. Science is still out.
So please learn French.
And the truth is that the doctors don't even know that we wind up in Halifax yet.
It's true. Yeah, no, the
research just isn't there.
I think it's something
Science
in the pills.
Needs to catch up.
And also, as a shout out too, so as a good problem that we've also faced in addition to this, we've recently had to up our storage on SoundCloud. One of the reasons being is that we are gaining enough popularity, surprisingly enough, that we warranted...
Are you saying that people listen to this show?
Surprisingly, we're actually, as of recording this...
I didn't sign up for that.
We're around 750.
Yeah, nobody told me that was where this is going.
Yeah, no, sorry. I thought we were just all listening... We were just the three listening to this, just the sounds of our own voices. Just some... a cool thing, though, with the upgrade to SoundCloud storage, we are able to obviously bring you the latest and greatest in queer representation media. However, we are also able to see the top countries who have been streaming our show. And unsurprisingly, shout out to Canada for being number 1, because we are number 1. But also, we want to give a shout out to our fan, singular, in a couple of countries here. The United Arab Emirates, thank you. Saudi Arabia. And
shout out to our boys overseas.
Woo! And also, we'd like to celebrate the fact that we are the number 1 podcast for queer representation in media in Slovakia. So, you know what? It's all looking up for us. We're doing pretty good, all things considered.
I forget. Have I ever told you my Slovakia story?
What's your Slovakia story?
Okay, so flashback to the 2010 Olympics. And it was, I think we were going to Olympics because there was a bunch of free shows, and we went to go see, I think the show was Ill Scarlet, Inward Eye, and Mariana's Trench, which 3 bands that never made it outside this country. And we really wanted to see Inward Eye, but because of some scheduling things, we didn't get to see them, which I'm still disappointed by.
That's tragic.
But they had to stop the show to show the Canada versus Slovakia game. Mm-hmm. So during that, we started going around and...
It was a nail biter.
Yeah. We started going around and introducing me to tourists as Rijanovic, the Slovakian... ambassador who will be sent back to her home country and killed if the Slovakian team loses. And that yeah, so we had many drunk American visitors just get very, very upset at my terrible
Your
Borat
predicament.
impression. Yeah, that was that day, and we saw Marianas Trench, and that was good.
Oh my god! I just want to know: are you proud of yourself?
There are still some websites where Rianovich is my username, so
Oh my god!
it stuck around for a bit.
Perfect. Well,
Duchess Rianovich.
God, we need to do another one of those. All right, so it brings us to, now that we've done the housekeeping, it does bring us to going over tonight's episode.
Real
so tonight,
shit.
The real shit. What you subscribe for is our cutting remarks.
is what makes the
on
big
queer
bucks.
representation. Yeah, exactly. The big dollar, I guess. We are reviewing the 2001 musical comedy drama Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Oh, yeah.
A film written for the screen. Yes. The film written for the screen and directed by John Cameron Mitchell, based on Mitchell's and Stephen Taft's stage musical Hedwig and the Angry Inch. It is basically just kind of, well, actually, I'll pass it over. Amy, you want to give kind of like a brief overview of what you saw? Because I believe this is your first time seeing it,
Yes,
actually.
so this is the first time I have seen this, which is deeply embarrassing and very sad. And I am quite disappointed in the fact that I have only seen it tonight because it is phenomenal. So,
It's better late than never.
we watched the 2001 movie, but it is a musical, like a stage play.
Yeah.
And basically it follows the story of the East German transsexual Hedwig,
Another former Soviet bloc country, along with Slovakia.
Oh my god.
who,
That's
It's all coming
segue.
together.
after the fall of the Berlin Wall, becomes sort of this pop idol. Not pop idol. How do you describe her?
Like a punk rock.
Like sort of
idol?
like a proto-punk.
Yeah.
Like, actually, I think that, are any of you familiar with Wayne County and the Electric Chairs?
No.
They were like
I'm
an
not that
early, like a
cool.
proto-punk band fronted by a trans woman. And I'm going to send you the picture of the band, and you'll see exactly what I mean by, I think the inspiration is pretty direct.
Shit, that is uncanny.
Okay, yeah, that is quite...
So I think it's a direct
It's-
reference.
Okay.
Holy shit, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's amazing. So yeah,
So
it's
what
kind-
happens in this?
Yeah, please go over that. Reed, do you want to kind of basically give a kind of an overview of the synopsis of the movie, the plot?
So Hedwig and the Angry Inch, yeah, it is about a individual from East Germany who, and again, spoilers, this is a very good movie, so please go watch it before listening to this. So that's our
It seems
recommendation.
important. I've watched it
I think I
once,
should-
and it already seems deeply, deeply important.
I think I should start tweeting out which movies we're going to watch ahead of time so
That's
people
a
can
good
kind of
idea.
watch them and enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, no, for sure. But anyways, Reed,
As
sorry.
though we don't decide what we're going to watch 15 minutes before we watch it.
Folks, we just kind of really do fly by the seat of our pants.
So the chronological
Assuming
story
we're
is,
wearing pants.
yeah, how
a
dare
big
you
assumption.
assume?
Did you just assume my undergarments?
Did you just assume my gender expression?
Listen, now that I am alone
wow.
in my own home recording the podcast with nobody else present,
Yeah, hands up, who's naked
it's
here?
honestly
Yeah.
offensive that you would assume
The
that I
eyes
would
have
wear
it.
pants.
So Hedwig is born a male in East Germany and grows up in a broken home, listening to American GI rock and roll, and after graduating college, ends up falling in love with an American GI who persuades her to present as a woman and get a sex change so they can get married and move back to America. So, and one of the instigating plot points is that the sex change is botched, and which leaves her with the
Angry
titular
Inch.
Angry Inch. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then once reaching America, the GI ends up leaving her for a man, which I'm sure we can all relate to.
Been there,
So-
done that.
We've all been there.
From that point, she decides to lean into her thrust upon identity and transitions to a mid-career ContraPoints character, and begins to perform music and ends up in a relationship with this young Christian boy who ends up taking all of her
Beautiful
songs
twink.
and leaving and then getting into
Amy,
like
was this not your like last Wednesday? This sounds exactly like your last date.
Yeah, this
Oh.
happens a lot.
Yeah, no, it's fair. This is the Tinder
Good
game.
rep-
We'll get into
representation.
this entire movie is trans culture. So
Okay.
yeah, and from there, the main plot of the movie is her and her band following her ex's more successful music career around the country, while going through this self exploration and finding out who she really is, you know, in comparison to these people and these situations that she surrounded herself with. So does that about sum it up? Did I miss
That's an
anything?
Yeah, I
excellent
think-
summary. Far better than
No,
I
I
was
think that's
going
pretty
to do.
good. Yeah, especially for like just kind of throwing it on the spot. It's perfect. I was just going to read Wikipedia, so this is way better, which is great. So yeah,
it's so
now that we've kind
fun.
of gone over the... Oh yeah, I mean, Wikipedia is just great for any of this shit. I don't know how to do my job otherwise. Now that we kind of go over the brief idea of what the movie is about, one of the main topics we'd like to discuss first, and I don't know which one of y'all put this in there, but does Hedwig count as a trans woman? Because the interesting thing about this movie, as we've seen in the past, there has been movies where one of the main tropes with transgender folks in movies, specifically trans women, has been the idea of forced femme. And even though I would argue that that was a part of this movie, it was handled very differently. Which begs the question of, you know, really is Hedwig a trans woman, or was it a man forced to femme?
So certainly,
Yeah, 'cause sorry. I just want to say this because this movie fits into the narrative of queer art, kind of in a similar place to Rocky Horror, where it definitely toes the line of, you know, touching on the trans experience, but is
I think it more than
questionable.
touches.
Yeah, well, this one obviously, I think this more so than
more than Rocky Horror for sure.
but it's definitely like on the line. It's definitely
dubious.
ambiguous, but still counts as like, you know, it is still in the canon of like
Yes.
queer cinema, like specifically to trans cinema.
Totally. So, I mean, I guess, like, one of the things is just, like, because one of the ideas that was explored in the movie, and I think it's the second song, is the idea of someone being separated into two parts.
Which I think we should get to in more depth a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm just kind of glossing over it real quick. But the idea is just, like, was that kind of more of a representation of the fact that Hedwig's identity had been ripped from him? And therefore the movie was a tribute to that? Because I would say if that was the case, then no, Hedwig was not a trans woman. Whereas if it's more along the lines of the exploration of the idea of the duality of an individual being like there's a, you know, for lack of a better term, there's the masculine and there's the feminine, is that more referencing that? And then if that is the case, then the case could be made that Hedwig is a trans woman.
So
Well, oh, sorry, go on.
like I think that in a lot of ways she sort of does embody trans women. Like she lives full time, you could say, as a woman presenting as you might if you were trans. But is that her leaning into an identity that was forced upon her? Is it sort of an extension of drag, an extension of like the persona that she portrays as an artist? Or
Totally.
is it
I mean,
her like
yeah.
earnest identity?
Well, that's interesting because, like, is it less so? Well, I feel like, and obviously this is probably, like, completely dissimilar from the people who have this experience, but it kind of touches on the idea of transition without dysphoria, which I know is something that a lot of people have, and this is, like, obviously, like, a completely different situation than most people who do embody that, but also like, is it less valid that she had this situation and leaned into the identity as opposed to having dysphoria and being like personally forced into it?
Yeah, because she certainly doesn't seem to have dysphoria. Like, dysphoria is not her emotional arc. It really has nothing to do with the emotions that she experiences as a character. Her only real gripe with her body is her angry inch, which, like, I would be pissed off too.
Which was one of the best songs. That was my favorite song in the whole show.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we all
that
had
was
different ones, but
that was excellent. Yeah.
that fucking Angry Inch song was so fucking good.
Yeah, but she where she says that, like, you know, she was happy with a dick, would have also been happy with a vagina, but got stuck in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, like, also, I mean, like, I know we're talking about whether Hedwig counts as a trans woman, but we also kind of glossed over the fact that it's like, does this also represent something like the idea of like gender fluidity or intersex as well?
Yes, the wall coming down.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's I think it's a good example, especially since like that was the focus, was the Berlin Wall. Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I would say that this is. I'm still not sure whether she counts as a trans woman, but for me, one of the interesting things is that it also kind of shows like how gender dysphoria works, but from the reverse of what, like, say for example, all of us have gone through, where it's someone who is forced to have another identity and they kind of have like a breakdown because of that. So it was almost like an idea, like, showing to cis people, it's like, hey, if you were forced to be this thing and you had to accept that identity, how would that affect you personally?
Oh, is she dysphoric about being like feminine and having this feminine persona at the end? Like, that wasn't quite what I saw in the ending.
Yeah, I think that was more of like a exception, like accepting the middle place as opposed to like leaning too hard. But also, I want to say, because there was the song, the what's it, Wig in a Box, which is a very, very, very like early transition song. Like, I thought, like, if you listen to that song, it actually, like, both subject wise and musically sounds like it could have been like a transgender dysphoria blues like B-side.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Think about
Laura
it.
Jane
Think
Grey.
about it.
Yeah.
Laura Jane Grey is still from this movie, and she will be made to pay for it one day.
Didn't we all? Haven't we all?
Yeah, I mean, we all ripped it off. So I think in conclusion, what we're kind of coming into is that Hedwig was the original centrist.
Absolutely.
And, yeah,
gender centrism.
Damn it. This is what we have to look forward
Radical
to. Radical
centrism. The angry inch. I think that nobody should have a penis or a vagina. We should all be somewhere in the middle.
We should all have angry inches.
I don't support these
like,
radical extremes.
She did go through an experience where she realized her life was better presenting female, and she had more fun presenting female, and it lent into it. But it wasn't necessarily dysphoria in the traditional sense, but it still came to the same conclusion.
Well, I would agree, and not to get too off topic here, because I just want to make sure that we, kind of approach some of the interesting things. But like while we're talking about like gender roles and what like Hedwig felt comfortable with, I think a very interesting thing was the exploration of gender for all the characters in this. I mean, Hedwig was the main focus. But there was the backup vocalist who this is a little bit of trivia, but in the stage production, in every stage production of the show and in the movie, it has been played. It's a very bearded guy. It looks like a biker type, but it's always been played by a woman. So even that was kind of interesting, and that character in there, their kind of journey into coming to discovery of like I would argue that character is the most trans in this movie because. It was like supposed to be this very
the one who is drawn to femininity and to drag and to the expression of alternative presentation. Not like with Hedwig, it was almost the other way around. She was drawn to it after that identity had been thrust upon her, whereas with the backup vocalist, whose name I don't remember, was drawn to this personally and almost intrinsically.
I mean,
Yitzhak, I think, was their name.
Oh, okay.
Who, again, another appearance of Michelle Rodriguez in drag.
Oh yes, that was played by Michelle Rodriguez.
Clearly,
excellent beard. They did a much better job with the look.
This movie is about like almost 20 years old, and they did a better fake beard than they did.
Significantly better, like drag king look.
Michelle Rodriguez is a fake beard.
Rodriguez managed in the assignment, but
that was.
I went to a drag show last week, and there was drag kings. It was just all Michelle Rodriguez. She just switched costumes. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, this character I thought was really interesting because, like, I think the whole time, like, the audience, especially the audience coming into this blind, is like not really sure what to make of this character because it's a cis woman, and you're not really sure if they're supposed to be playing a cis man or a trans man, but then this character spends the entire time sort of like connecting to their femininity through Hedwig. But also, this is kind of a weird version of assuming that this is supposed to be a cis man connecting, or I mean, supposedly a trans woman, connecting with their femininity, like an egg connecting with their femininity, but being attracted to and abused by a trans woman, which is, I think, a really interesting dynamic that I'm not sure if it was an intentional.
Yeah,
but I
it
think
was kind of eggy.
But like you kind of get what I mean, where it's like assuming that this character was supposed to be like a trans woman or a like male connecting with femininity, being attracted to a like dominant trans woman who in turn
and
like
sort of
emotionally
idolizing her
and sexually
as
but is emotionally and sexually abused by that dominant figure, which is something that happens a lot in the trans community.
It sure does.
And without getting too much on like a pedestal in terms of like the predatory nature of some certain trans women, that's a different topic. But also too, like, not even just like, you know, the two characters there in terms of that trans identity, but also exploring the gender roles of the other characters. For example, there's that moment where all the band members are sitting around a bed feeding the baby. There is
what's their manager's baby, I think, or something.
I guess so, but like it was just like it was all like because the entire band is just all guys, but they're all just like hanging out with a baby and they're doing stuff, and there's like no problems. It's not, and I think what I like about that the most is that sometimes when there's when a lot of mainstream cinema or media tries to emphasize men in maternal roles, it's very ham-fisted. It's like, look, there's a guy doing stuff with a baby.
Yeah, it needs
just
to be
like,
almost like a spectacle, like interesting in and of itself. Whereas this just sort of happens.
Yeah, exactly. They're just like out there hanging out with a baby.
Like it's almost sort of I think it's almost played for like a gag, where it's just supposed to be like, you know, a way to like, these are a bunch of like angry punk rock dudes, but in their off time they're kind of soft, which is like kind of into the thing where like a lot of like people can get kind of upset when what it reminds me of is the trope of like having a big buff guy dressed really femininely, which is like obviously like a lot of people get upset over for it being transphobic, but I think that there's like a fundamental joke of people doing like what we perceive as the fundamental opposite of what we perceive them to do.
Yeah,
and I think that is always going to be funny, and I think that is fine. And this is another example of that, like a bunch of like tough punk rock dudes like passing around a baby, like taking care of it, is kind of the same.
Well, because
thing.
it subverts your expectation, and that's kind of what comedy is.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the thing I like about this comedy specifically is just the fact that it just doesn't call too much attention to itself, and it's just like it is another piece on the tapestry, which is this movie. Like it's just like. It's like every little part was thought out with. A really good example I would relate to a comic book would be the Killing Joke with Batman, where it's just there's this moment in one of the panels where it's I know it's kind of a weird draw from this, but I was just reading this recently. And as Batman's walking to there's a secretary, and on her desk is this little sign and detail. It just says, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." And it's like. It's in there, and most people would just overgloss it, and it's like not even that big of a deal. But like, it sets the mood so perfectly for the rest of the film.
Yeah, I watched that H-Bomber guy video too.
Yeah, I know. God, isn't he great? He's so good.
He's a trans ally.
He's the best. Oh no, he's like royalty at this point in time.
So, Tommy Gnosis is the guy who steals all of Hedwig's music and runs off with her career and abandons her emotionally.
Which is, yeah, a lot of interest, like trans culture revolves around this relationship, because the entire movie is Hedwig just basically pathetically creeping on her ex, which is trans culture. Early on, Hedwig corrupting an innocent Christian twink, also trans culture.
Oh God, yeah, no, you're right.
And also, just as a quick tangent, Hedwig's first band is she starts with a bunch of Korean war wives, and I think starting a band of Asian expats fronted by a trans woman is Vancouver culture.
That's extremely Vancouver culture.
Yeah, no.
It's a very relatable movie. But
it's so good.
In a darker sense, the story of Tommy is very much trans culture, in that he is a man, a cis man, who I'm not exactly certain of his sexuality, but he seems to be straight, or at least straight identifying, very attached to his heterosexuality, who winds up in this relationship with a trans woman who he idolizes and is attracted to and has an emotional and sexual relationship with, and uses as his muse artistically, and then eventually becomes too ashamed of the relationship with her, is unable to, as Hedwig says, love the front of her, and freaks out when he winds up touching her angry inch, and then runs and abandons her, and runs off with her career.
Did you catch the part where during the basically the "I'm trans" conversation, the bombshell noise in the background?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
because her voice slowly like drifts off into silence, and it's just a.
And that relationship of a cis man who is attracted to a trans woman but is too ashamed to own it and uses her emotionally and sexually and creatively, and then discards her when he is no longer of use to her and because he is too ashamed of her. That is deeply, deeply relatable, and it stung a lot. Like, that's why I found this movie so dark.
Well, especially when it comes back later and tries to get her back, and then as soon as they're found out, disowns her immediately again.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is also, like, just as, like, a note to that as well. It's just, like, it's these, like, you're right in terms of, like how that feels in terms of the trans person. It's just, like, you're there for that person, and then you're discarded once they're like, well, you know, like, I have needs too, I'm a person. They're like, nah, never mind. But it's also, like, those, like, on that boy side, Tommy Gnosis, when he was younger, it's also too, like, it's also a commentary on those, I say good Christian boys, but, like, they can be whatever naive boys that they come from, where it's just, like, you know, they have this upbringing, it's, you know, very it's very clean, Christian, easy cut, and then a factor comes into their life which causes them to question it. I mean, like, for myself, when I was younger, like, there was one of my first girlfriends was, like, this goth chick, and, like, I was, believe it or not, I was, like, in youth ministry and all that shit, which is, you know, it was a weird phase of my life. But like, I hung out with her, and she just, like, she played like, she played me some music. She's like, here's Green Day, here's Bright Eyes, you can wear black eyeliner, and I'm just like, this is fucking awesome. And though that relationship went on a tangent, she was kind of my exploration to, like, an alternative lifestyle. And in this regard, and in this movie too, you have that, but it's taken to its next level, which is when the push comes to shove, and it's like, hey, it's okay to be like this. The shame, like you said, is too much. It's too ingrained there, and they almost revert back to that state or rebel against it.
No, exactly. I get that. Where it's like, and I think also, like, a part of that is, I think, the issue of the way that other people help us find ourselves can very easily turn into using people.
I mean, on some level, he did use her to explore a lifestyle that he then was not able to commit to because of those ingrained values, but he doesn't, like, go back to being a good Christian boy. He's just, like, an emo punk. Like, he's still singing all these songs and, like, being an edgelord. He's just sort of throwing her under the bus.
And I think that's because, like, it's one of those things where he, like, if we go with those boys as it is, their identity is those boys. The sweet, sweet boys. Their identity isn't wound up in who they are. It's what they're against, or what they're running from. And in this case, it's basically like, you know, his Christian fucking guitar choir that he had. And then again, in Hedwig, sees something that is what he wants to have, but is not brave enough to do it. Which is kind of, you know, kind of eggy, and does also speak to, like, the trans experience. Like, you know, you look at the situation, you go, I want to be, you know, I want to be that. Like, I remember when I started transition, I was like a fucking 250-pound beard.
Eggy.
You don't think he's eggy?
I think
he's just kind of a twinky soft boy.
Yeah, like, I think that, I don't know, like, I can see why, like, that is an interpretation, that he's sort of eggy and estranged from his own femininity and afraid to explore it, but I also think he's really just, like, he doesn't actually do much in terms of femininity besides wearing, like, emo boy makeup.
Guyliner.
Guyliner.
And I think that more so than being ashamed of exploring his own femininity is just being ashamed of relating to hers.
Yeah, no, totally.
And
I think it's a way
engaging
better
with
way of putting
hers
that.
and believing hers to be genuine.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's more accurate than what I was going for.
I mean, also, like, I have a grudge. Clearly, I am damaged.
Is it from all the good Christian boys you've been screwing?
Fucking Tommy Gnosis stole all my music, and now all I have is a podcast, and so, like, I gotta complain about it somewhere.
So what you're saying is our Hedwig is what, the boys from Chapo?
Yes.
One thing I think I want to, like, extrapolate, and I am assuming that this isn't intentional, but just building onto that, there's the idea of, like, straight culture or, like, mainstream culture stealing from queer culture.
Oh yeah.
And that's
That's
certainly
actually really good.
sort of on the individual level, that's what happens in this movie, but also more broadly, that's what happens socially and like in society.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like it happened. Like, it's great because actually, now that you put it that way, and I agree, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but like that movie almost just like distract every other show we've reviewed up to now, and I think it will for all the shows we do going forward. Where it's just like, because again, like, yeah, if we think back to The Danish Girl, that was a movie that was advertised as queer, but it was queer cinema for cis people, and they kind of took that from us.
Yeah. Well, and also you have queer music that is inherently queer and radical because of her relationship to her gender and the fact that she is radically outside of the norm, being appropriated by like a cishet guy who can keep the aesthetic of it while erasing the radical aspects of it, which more broadly is what like mainstream culture does with counterculture. It happens with queer culture, it happens with black culture, with
Yeah,
hip-hop and the mainstreaming of hip-hop.
I was gonna say that the only way that this could be more accurate is if there was a black band following around Hedwig that she stole all of her songs
Yes,
from.
that's really what this movie is missing, is the fact that a lot of white queer culture is appropriated from black culture.
Oh my god, that's too fucking funny.
I really, they need to make a sequel where that's the premise.
Yeah.
And there was actually a version of the stage play where Hedwig was played by Taye Diggs, a black man. So
That's
that
dope.
ties it all together. So throughout this, there's these two themes that we've touched on, where it's both the separation and coming together of Berlin, like before and after the Berlin Wall, along with a take on Plato's Symposium, specifically the part where he's talking, where it's Aristophanes talking about the story about how originally all creatures were like two in one body, and then one time Zeus split them all in half, and love is finding the separated part of you. And it's this idea of the split self and identifying or looking at gender through that. And I think we wanted to talk a little bit about
that this movie is so highbrow.
It is the intellectual Rocky Horror.
Yeah, absolutely
and,
is.
like, it basically packages it all in like punk rock dick jokes. Like, it's so good.
Right, yeah. And so the theory of gender presented here is, for one, presented through this metaphor of the Berlin Wall, where Hedwig was born the year the Berlin Wall came up, and most of the events of the movie take place in the years after its fall. And sort of her relationship to her gender and her surgery and her transition all have to do with her trying to cross over the separation of Germany, trying to cross over to West Germany and live a life of freedom. And so that as a metaphor for crossing over gender, crossing over this impenetrable barrier, is interesting.
Well, it's also, and it's also because they could have picked a lot of symbolic moments in history to kind of showcase that, but I think the Berlin Wall was a really good example too, because of not only just that, but because of the like the nature of what it was like on the other side. Like, it was very dark and cold and uncaring and unloving.
A metaphor for masculinity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, now that you mention that, I mean, like, maybe we approached this wrong, where it was just the whole idea, like, it was mostly about, like, men embracing their feminine.
With that, the Berlin Wall coming down can come to mean interesting things. If you look at sort of West and East Germany as this gender binary that Hedwig is forced to fully traverse in order to live life on the other side and gain the benefits of the other side that she was seeking. The Berlin Wall coming down, which coincidentally was coming down in a time when gender norms were beginning in sort of this embryonic stage to be challenged in a way that has been growing since, and we are living in an outgrowth of that. And so the Berlin Wall comes to represent this enforced authoritarian binary that you have to live on either side of, and it coming down leaves the room for fluidity and for a challenging and a subversion of the binary. That's my hot take.
No, I think that's actually a really good way to look at it as well. And also, too, just the fact that matters, like, when he got over the wall, or she, because it was like in the he state going to the she state, when she eventually got over the wall, the idea was going to be a better life, and it actually wasn't. And I think if we kind of go along this analogy, I think it's when we go to like the trans experience, I think one of those things, I think it's a really good commentary on the fact that, like, you know, transition will fix that part of you, but it won't fix everything that's going on. I remember that's like what my doctor...
Welcome to my Medium article.
Yeah, exactly. It's, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, like, it's one of those things, like, transition will fix the dysphoria, but, like, everything else about you is, that is a problem is still going to be a problem.
Well, and when you're still existing within a binary gender state, that is inherently oppressive. Like, the rigid patriarchal binary is oppressive to everybody, because binaristic patriarchal conceptions of gender are oppressive to everybody. And, like, picking a side, and even if that side is more comfortable, doesn't mean that all of that baggage is going to go away. You know, you're becoming a woman. Being a woman fucking sucks, dude.
And I think that's the thing, is, like, a lot of the moments in the movie when people were not having to adhere to their gender roles, that's when they were happiest. Even, like, again, not to come back to it, but or not to drive this point home too much, but like all the members in the band, yeah, they were kind of rocking and stuff like that, but they didn't look terribly happy. And then there's that moment when they're in the hotel and they're just laughing and joking and hanging out with the kid.
Yeah,
like there's these moments in there where it just the filmmaker does a really good job of kind of like laying out that, like, hey, the moment when you don't have to worry about these things, or you're just being yourself, that's when you're happiest. Fucking Hedwig on a bunch of tires, just like, you know, the equivalent of what drinking in a graveyard, with a bunch of people just like, yeah, I'm just telling you a story. Those are the moments. It's like when the binary gets enforced, or any of those rules, that's when things just get really bad.
Right, and so that sort of ties into the other area in which this movie deals with metaphor, which is the idea of gender as this artificial separation of a whole, where all people were once, in this sort of platonic state of all gender, of non-binary, encompassing masculinity and femininity, and being split apart is sort of destructive. There's that quote, when Eve was still inside of Adam, it was paradise. It was when she was separated from Adam that paradise was lost. So when she enters him again, paradise will be regained, that quote rules. But also it does tie into that idea of you wind up being happier when you are existing in a state that isn't limited by this artificially constructed and staked out binary.
Yeah, and like everybody in the movie suffered for having to adhere to that binary, and honestly, I think that's a really good commentary on just day-to-day life. Like, it really is. I think people should just be allowed to do whatever the hell they want, because I think if you split masculinity and femininity so wide that only one gender gets access to it, which obviously we know there's, you know, it's fluid, it's damaging to people. Just to be able to be themselves and explore whatever parts they want to explore. Like, you know, the whole idea of, like, this doesn't get talked a lot about, but, like, the idea of like, if someone comes out and they say they're gay, and then they, after a while, realize that they're not, and there's, like, a shame associated with that, but, like, there should be. Like, if someone's trying to figure their shit out, or trying to figure out who they are, and they think, I think I'm going to be gay, and, you know, they try it and it's not for them, because that does happen sometimes, and that's, in my mind, that's perfectly fine. You're just trying to figure stuff out. It's no different than you're like, oh, I'm going to try to do baseball, and I'm going to see if I'm a baseballer, or I'm going to try photography.
Yeah, no, it's not just about arriving at the right place. Like, that stumbling process of exploration is itself beautiful, and is itself an end. You know, it's learning about yourself and about what makes you happy and what doesn't.
Yeah,
and that's like, you're always moving forward in that process.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes when it comes to when I was trying to improve my mental health is, no matter where you go in the world, there you are. And so that's the truth with this movie as well. It's just like, no matter where Hedwig went, there Hedwig was.
Yeah, and the implications are kind of... The implications are interesting, because it sort of gets into the idea of, you know, how many people who transition are splitting the difference, are sort of settling for the best thing available. And I think that it creates an interesting case study for, like, non-binary trans people who, you know, might historically have had to pick one binary or the other, and have to go through this this period of self-exploration to find the person they are, like, which I think all of us, even if you do end up being a fairly binary trans person, there is a journey that you have to take of self-acceptance, where you do need to look at the far end of one side and look at the far end of the other side and decide where you're happy.
Well, yeah, and I think part of what this movie has to say is that everyone compromises with gender so long as there is this binary. You know, if there's the Berlin Wall, you kind of have to pick between West Berlin or East Berlin, and both of them aren't gonna be perfect fits for you, because both of them have good and bad aspects.
And
as if your only options are man and woman and they come loaded with all of this baggage, sure, you might be happier on one side of that wall, but so long as the wall exists, you're going to be restricted and you're going to be compromising. There's that quote, like, instead of changing society, like, I had the choice between changing myself or changing society, and I chose to change myself because I could not change society. And I think that is where a lot of people wind up with gender.
Yeah, and everyone was happiest when the wall finally came down. They were able to go back and forth between them without any problems. No, I think it was very good in that point. This has been a more heavier subject, so I'd like to give one of my favorite quotes in the movie, where young Hedwig is watching his favorite TV show, which is the Jesus Show. And the mom turns it off, and the boy says to the mom, "Jesus died for our sins," and the mom said, "So did Hitler."
It's better to be powerless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was so fucking good.
Well, it's kind of funny because also, like, another good quote is that it's and this is kind of coming away from it, is that after she, you know, has a botched sex change. And also, just another tangent, I want to say one of the best quotes is when she's, like, talking about that and says, you know, she woke up and she was bleeding down there. I've only been... Fuck, where's the... first day as a woman, and it's already my time of the month.
Yeah, it's so good.
Oh, it's a good line. But then, you know, like, she goes to this traumatic experience, moves across the country, then her partner leaves her for another person, so she's left alone, and then she looks at the TV and the Berlin Wall is fallen, and like, all she needed to do was wait a couple months, and she could have gotten out, which I don't know what the implications of that are, but it's sort of an interesting wrench thrown into the theme of the story.
And she looks so heartbroken in that moment, because, you know, like, the GI says to walk away from East Germany, you got to leave something behind. To be free, one has to give up a little part of oneself, and I know just the doctor to take it. And that sort of comes up with this idea of compromising with the gender binary. And then so she did, and she lost a part of herself, and now she's looking back and realizing that she might not have had to.
Yeah, and it's basically coming to terms with, will she ever get it back? And I think, like, I don't know, I think by the end of the movie that she did, in a sense, which is just acceptance. You know, it's a heavy-handed metaphor, but the idea of her walking naked down the street, it's kind of like all to bear, everyone to see it. And, like, it's interesting because, like, as she's walking down the alleyway to the streets, there's people walking by and no one pays her any mind. And it's just the idea of she's like, when you're being yourself, then nobody really cares. Like, or sorry, like, nobody, like, you are basically above other people's judgment.
Actually, I want to go back to that quote, like, the idea of, like, the implication of transition, and, you know, because I think we go into transition with the idea that you have to leave something behind, which we all kind of accept, and then coming out the other side and realizing you didn't have to. And this is just coming to me now because I was absolutely terrified to transition, like cripplingly terrified. That's why it took me as long as it did. And then going through it, like, pretty much everybody I was afraid of reacting badly reacted fine. And, like, at a certain point I realized, like, obviously there are terrifying things out there in the world, but the things I was most scared of were all in my head. The things I was most scared of did not happen, and that I had absolutely no business waiting for. And which is, like, almost a traumatic thing to go through, because then you realize, like, I was so scared, and I waited so long for something that wasn't even there.
There's another quote that I think speaks to that. Sorry, I've got so many written down. She says, when she's reminiscing about her childhood, how to get over the wall. People died trying. Such were the thoughts troubling my tiny head. And the sort of idea of her ruminating over the fact that getting over the wall was a suicide mission. You know, that she was going to get shot by snipers if she even thought to try. And in that sort of moment where the stakes seem so unbelievably high, I think speaks to what you were saying about your own experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like on my end too, and just kind of complimenting Reason, like I lost most of the people I knew in my transition. Like I it's funny, I actually thought the opposite of Ree, which was just that I'm like, oh, my the people that I'm with will be there for me, and they pretty much all disappeared. But the part where I finally became happiest with my transition and where I was when I just accepted who I was as an individual, transition being a part of that, and I was infinitely more happier than I was when those people were in my life. So again, kind of speaking to the end of the movie, which is the whole idea that like when you lay it all to bear, then you're above the judgment of others, and you just simply don't care. And that's where I'm at. And like, it's funny enough too, it was a lot through punk music and stuff like that I got to that place. So this movie has a special place in my heart for that reason. So obviously a lot of talk about this episode. There was a lot to talk about. Yeah, it got pretty heavy. Thanks for bearing with us. This is this is definitely a different episode than we've done in the past, just because
it's a more highbrow, more intellectual movie. It's also, I think, deals with a lot more concrete themes. You know, we're not picking the bones here. We have like a full meal to eat, you know?
Exactly. And so, I mean, without kind of giving up the game too much, we'll go to the question that we always ask at the end of the show is this good representation? I'll leave it up to one of y'all to start off with, and then we'll kind of just go around.
So for me, this movie has always been in sort of a similar place to Rocky Horror, where I think that it can be very, very good for like trans and otherwise queer people to like used as a fun exploration of identity and just like a fun clowning of it, as well as touching on some deeper things. But also, I would never want this to be the first, like, much like Rocky Horror, I would never want this to be the first queer piece of media for a cis person to see. Yeah. Which is sometimes the case.
And, like, I certainly agree. See, I kind of thought it was generally just fantastic. Like, I don't think it was very problematic. I don't think it had anything that I have major gripes with. I mean, certainly it leaves a lot up to interpretation in terms of its solid take on gender or what is Hedwig's identity in the end. We aren't fully sure. But in doing so, it doesn't ever punch down, and it never, I think, prescribes ideas that are harmful. It's very raw and very honest, and, like, certainly portraying an experience that is not common. I don't think that many of us are, like, East Berlin sex workers with a botched bottom surgery.
Well, speak for yourself, all right?
Well, because but again, it's like Rocky Horror. The moment it becomes problematic is when you assume that this is the story of a trans person.
Well, yeah.
No, for me personally, it's funny. I actually take the opposite position to Ree in terms of I would definitely show this. Like my brother is just kind of coming to his own in terms of understanding. What queer culture is, not because he's gay, but my brother, bless his soul, is one of those people who like ask me, is like, why is there a gay pride parade? Not because he's being malicious, but because he generally never got to ask the question, he never had to think about it. So like, if he ever comes to me and he's like, hey, can you show me a movie? This will probably be the first movie I show him, because I think it translates a very good universal theme of just the whole idea of what people, the similarities between what cis people go through and trans people, which is just like we're all transitioning into something. We're not necessarily, for us it's very heavy-handed. We're transitioning in, physically, but some people are just going to different roles of their life, becoming mothers, fathers, jobs, moving to different provinces where people speak French and I don't, so I have to learn the language. It's transition as a universal theme, and understanding too that, like, I don't know, like if I was like a completely just greenhorn Christian boy watching this show with an earnest heart, mind you, and I saw that, and the whole idea of just like being able to explore both femininity and masculinity, that would be a good place. This movie presents the question of like, why can't you do that? And
Yeah.
then you start to realize that there's no good answer for that.
Sort of to build on what Ree said about this, like it becomes problematic when you assume that it is the story of a trans person. I think more so it becomes problematic when you assume that it is the story of trans people.
That's what I meant. That's more what I meant.
And I
No,
think
that's
that
fair.
often what I think people deep down want with representation is a movie that portrays the experience accurately, which is impossible.
Because
And
we're
is
all
never
different.
going to be anything more than simplistic and messy. And I
Yeah.
think what this movie does is it takes one person's experience, which is very messy and very complicated, and it portrays it earnestly and it portrays it sympathetically. And in doing so, I think it does a much better job of dealing with these themes than something that tried to be broader.
Yeah, and I mean, it also, too, like, I think one of the things I like most about this movie, even with that idea and taking it further, is just, like, there is so much to unpack from this movie, because even as we've been talking, I'm just like, oh, what about that? I wonder if
me
that
too,
means that.
yeah.
And it's just like...
I know
I'm,
we could
like,
go for another hour.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to cut out so much from this, and it's such a fucking... This is why we're gonna have Patreon soon, so I can put all the extra stuff up.
Yeah.
Like, this is my 4th time seeing this film, and it's still just, like, it blows me away every single time. Like,
It's phenomenal.
I cry at the end of it every single time. Like, I cried about it when I watched it today, and it's just... Yeah, so in terms of just, like, summarizing, is it good representation? I think it to some degree, yes. Like, you know, Amy said, there's no one thing I can show you, like, this is the trans person, because we're not homogenous.
Because there's no such thing as good representation.
Exactly. And so would this be a movie I would say is, like, good queer cinema? Absolutely.
Yeah,
This
no,
is
I would
one of
agree
the
with that
best.
100%.
This is
Yeah.
one of the best, even out of queer cinema, this is one of the best movies I've ever watched. The soundtrack
love
is
it.
phenomenal. Art direction is incredible. The actors do a bang-up job. It's also, I know this is a small thing, but it's the exact amount of run time that needs to exist. And it's also universal. Like, Ree, you mentioned that the gentleman from Hamilton is playing on the stage as well.
I might have been wrong with about that. I'm
Well,
pretty
whatever.
sure
It's
Tay
canonical
Diggs-
now. It's canonical now. It's just, we're going to say Hamilton is Hedwig. But yeah, no, I think this is probably one of the best pieces of
It was
cinema
David
ever.
Diggs. David Diggs was in Hamilton. That was a racist assumption of me. So I apologize.
Oh, no. So this is what we're going out with. All right, cool. That's
Maybe
fine.
we should just
I'm
cut
okay.
that bit.
No, absolutely not.
Wait. They're brothers.
Well,
So I just mixed up their first names.
well, this
Maybe
is,
we should just cut that bit. I think we should just cut
No.
that bit.
No,
Absolutely not.
no. David Diggs is a legend. Tay Diggs is also a legend. We celebrate late Black History Month.
Oh my god. Anyways, thank you all again for joining us. This has been a great episode. This has been one of the actual few movies that I think this is a much needed break for all of us from the absolute shit most of us have been watching.
Are
Yeah,
you
no,
saying
I'm so
that
glad.
the assignment was shit?
Ugh, I still can't get it out of my head. There was no action in an action movie. What the fuck? Why?
I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, but I will accept your constructive criticism, Madeline.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. This
Although
is why
maybe
we're no
you
longer
should have
together.
just told me that when we were watching it.
No, I wanted you to find out 2 episodes after the fact.
That you hated my favorite movie.
All right, so yeah, so I guess just to kind of wrap things up, I'm Madeline Hops. You can find me on Twitter at rabbit_is_dead. In terms of things, I'll be off and on. Like I said, I'm moving across the country in about T-minus 20-ish days. I will be looking to film a short video essay that I will probably shamelessly plug somehow on this show, like I'm doing right now. So yeah,
I'm all
that'd be
about
cool as well.
shameless plugging.
Oh, just oh god. Anyways, the rest of you. Fuck.
I'm Amelia Blair. You can find me on Twitter at Lavender Ashtray. I don't do anything. I'm a broken academic.
I'm Ree Carter. I've mostly just been angry at the world tweeting for the last little while, so hopefully I'll just get back to shit posting.
Shit posting. What would the world be without it?
At Ree Carter.
Thank you. Yes. Perfect. And so, and remember, just because it's bad doesn't mean it's not good. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm from the land where you still hear